Black CEO denied first-class seat 30 minutes later. He owns the airline. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Sir, this seat isn't for people like you. The words cut through the hum of the cabin like a blade. Every conversation in first class froze. Heads turned, eyes darted. The air thickened, that subtle, suffocating silence that always follows a public humiliation. A flight attendant stood firm in front of seat 1A, her posture rigid, her tone polished with authority. Behind her, the captain lingered near the cockpit door, arms crossed, quietly observing. In front of them sat Malik Carter, calm, composed, and silent. A black man in his 40s, clean shave, black t-shirt, titanium watch, small carry-on at his feet. Nothing about him screamed wealth, but everything about him whispered power. Still, no one in that cabin could hear it. Sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass again, the attendant insisted. He handed it to her without a word. Her eyes scanned the ticket, disbelief tightening her features. Seat 1A? First class? She repeated, as if the paper had lied. A murmur rippled through the rows. Someone whispered, he must have printed that online. Another voice, security should check him before takeoff. Phones were already out, cameras rolling. Malik stayed still, the only movement his thumb tapping a draft email on his phone. The subject line, final sign-off airline acquisition deal, but no one noticed. The captain stepped forward. Sir, can you confirm your name? Malik Carter. And how did you purchase this ticket? He looked up, eyes steady. The same way everyone else does. The tension climbed another notch. The attendant's cheeks flushed red. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy until this is cleared up. And if it doesn't clear up, Malik asked softly, then you'll be escorted off the plane. A quiet scoff came from behind him. Man, just let it go, a young passenger said. It's not worth the trouble. Malik turned his head slightly, a half smile breaking the calm. Sometimes, he said. It is. The attendant straightened her uniform, pulling out a radio. Security to gate 4. Passenger issue. The captain exhaled. Sir, please don't make this harder than it has to be. It is end quote. Also, you knew to diver deplice. Malik didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He simply opened his laptop, resting it gently on the tray table. On the glowing screen, a headline draft from Forbes. Private equity titan Malik Carter expands aviation empire. He looked up, voice low, almost serene. Tell me, he said, what kind of person does belong here? Before the attendant could answer, the screen fades. Voiceover, calm but firm. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Malik Carter. The shot lingers on Malik's face, composed, unshaken. The cabin, still watching. No one yet realizing, the man they're trying to remove owns the sky they're flying through. 30 minutes earlier, before the chaos, Malik Carter had been just another passenger walking through Terminal 7. No entourage, no assistant, no tailored suit, just a man moving quietly through the noise of morning flights. He'd chosen to fly commercial today. Not because he had to. His private jet waited at a hangar 2 terminals away, but because he wanted to see, with his own eyes, how people were treated when no one knew their worth. The line at security had been long, yet familiar. The subtle stares. The double take from an officer scanning his ID. Mr. Carter, occupation? Investor? He'd said simply. The man nodded, but his eyes said, you sure? Malik was used to that look. He'd seen it since he was 16 in stores, at hotels, even at his own board meetings before the introductions. A face they didn't expect in the room. A tone that said, prove you belong here. Now, walking down the jet bridge, he'd almost laughed at the irony. Row after row of business travelers, scrolling through spreadsheets and sipping coffee, all trying to look important. None of them knowing that the man in the black t-shirt had just signed a $1.2 billion acquisition deal that would put him among the top stakeholders in their airline. The gate agent had smiled politely as he scanned his pass, until her screen flashed red. Uh, one moment, sir. She double-checked, frowned, then waved him through. You're all set. Seat 1A. Her tone carried that same hesitation, polite disbelief, dressed up as procedure. Malik had nodded, as always. He'd learned that silence speaks louder than confrontation. Inside the jetway, he could already hear the difference between cabins, the hush of first class versus the chatter behind the curtain. It wasn't just about space or service. It was about assumption. The attendant waiting by the door smiled at the passengers ahead of him, bright, courteous, welcome aboard. But when her eyes reached him, the smile faltered for half a second. A blink, a recalibration. Then she spoke. May I see your ticket, sir? It was the third time that morning someone had asked. He handed it over anyway. First class, she repeated, eyes narrowing slightly, scanning him from sneakers to wristwatch. Yes, Malik said. Seat 1A. Her lips tightened, but she stepped aside. He walked in, every gaze tracking his movement like gravity. The older man in 1B shifted uncomfortably, pretending to check his phone. Across the aisle, a woman leaned in to whisper something, the kind of whisper that never needed words. Malik placed his bag neatly in the overhead bin and sat down. No tension in his shoulders, no irritation in his eyes. Just that same calm. The calm of someone who's seen prejudice too many times to let it break him. He looked out the window as sunlight splashed across the wing. In his mind, a quiet promise echoed. One day, they'll learn who really runs this sky. And as the captain's voice crackled through the speakers, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Flight 726 to New York. Malik closed his eyes, exhaled slowly, and waited for the lesson to begin. The hum of the engines built slowly, like a warning. First class shimmered under white cabin lights, champagne glasses, folded linens, quiet conversations. Everything meant to feel superior. Everything meant to separate. Malik Carter sat in seat 1A, eyes steady on the screen ahead. On it, the flight map, a simple blue arc from LAX to JFK. But to him, it was more than a route. It was the symbol of a system he was about to change. The attendant passed by with practiced politeness, topping off a man's drink in 1C. Her tone softened when she said sir to him. When she reached Malik, it hardened again. Excuse me, sir. Are you sure you're in the right seat? He looked up, patient but sharp. I'm sure, he replied. Her eyes flicked to his boarding pass on the armrest, 1A. Still, she hesitated. Would you mind if I double-check with the gate? Malik's jaw tightened just slightly. You already did. A man across the aisle leaned over, trying to sound casual but loud enough for others to hear. Probably some mix-up, he said with a smirk. They don't usually let. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Malik turned toward him, expression unreadable. Let what? He asked quietly. The man stuttered, then smiled that nervous, dismissive smile. Never mind. Just saying these airlines mess up all the time. Any snow. Right, Malik said, his tone flat. All the time. The attendant moved away, murmuring into her radio. Across the cabin, whispers began to float like static. He doesn't look first class. Maybe he's on standby. Maybe he sneaked in. Malik could hear every word, each one landing like a pebble against glass. He'd lived this scene before, different cities, different settings, same script, but this time felt different. Not because it hurt more, but because he no longer cared to explain himself. He reached for his laptop. The glow lit his face as the engines rumbled louder. His inbox overflowed with contracts, market projections, and board messages. One unread email from his legal advisor caught his eye. Subject: Acquisition final. All signatures confirmed. Welcome to the sky, Mr. Carter. A faint smile touched his lips. He clicked it open, scrolled once, then closed the lid. He didn't need to read it. He already knew what it meant, ownership. The attendant returned, a touch of tension in her step. Sir, she said quietly, could I please see your ID? Malik glanced up at her, his tone still calm. Is that standard for everyone in first class today, or just me? She froze, lips parting without an answer. He handed her the ID anyway. Here, take your time. As she walked away, the man in 1B leaned in. Man, I just move. They're not worth the headache. Malik smiled faintly. That's the thing about headaches, he said. They remind you you're still alive. Outside, the runway lights stretched endlessly into the dark. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. But inside, something heavier was preparing to take off a lesson about dignity, perception, and power. Malik leaned back, fingers interlocked, eyes half closed. They thought he was just another passenger out of place. In 30 minutes, they'd realize he was the one who decided where this plane and this company was going next. The seatbelt sign was still on when the tension snapped. The attendant returned, flanked by a second crew member, both faces tight, voices rehearsed. "Sir," she began, "we've reviewed the manifest, and there seems to be a discrepancy with your ticket information." Her words dripped with that polished tone companies use to sound polite while being condescending. Malik didn't move. "Discrepancy?" he asked evenly. "What kind?" The second attendant shifted, holding a tablet. "It says here the name on this ticket doesn't match our system." Malik's brow lifted. "And what does it say?" One moment." She scrolled nervously. "It says the ticket belongs to—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the name. Malik Carter. The exact same name printed on the passport in her colleague's hand. The attendant hesitated, clearly realizing the error, but pride is a hard thing to swallow in public. She doubled down. "Well, sometimes these systems are delayed, sir. I'm sure you understand we have to verify." Malik leaned forward slightly, voice calm, unshaken. "You've verified 3 times already." Murmurs began to ripple across the cabin. The man in 1C shook his head. "This is ridiculous. Just let him sit." But another passenger, a woman with diamond earrings and a forced smile, whispered to her husband, "You never know. People do crazy things these days." Malik heard it all. Every syllable, every word, another reminder that respect, for some people, still came with conditions. The captain stepped out of the cockpit again, this time more visibly irritated. "What seems to be the problem?" "Ticket issue, Captain," the attendant replied quickly. "We're sorting it out." Malik turned toward him, eyes level. "No, you're not sorting it out. You're escalating it." The captain frowned. "Sir, I need you to cooperate. We can't have disturbances before takeoff." Malik met his gaze. "The disturbance didn't come from me." A beat of silence. Then the captain said what everyone else was thinking, but didn't have the nerve to say aloud. "Sir, if you can't comply, we'll have to ask you to step off the aircraft." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Every phone in the first 2 rows was raised now, recording. A man whispered, "Get this on TikTok." Someone chuckled nervously, trying to mask the discomfort that filled the room. Malik looked around the cabin, scanning every face. He saw the discomfort, the curiosity, the quiet prejudice hiding behind fake smiles. He'd been here before, not on this plane, but in 100 boardrooms, 1,000 subtle moments where power had to prove itself before being recognized. He took a breath. "You really want to remove me?" The captain hesitated. "It's procedure, sir." "No," Malik said softly. "It's perception." He reached for his phone, opened an app, and typed one message. "Boarded. Witnessing their customer service firsthand. We'll discuss post-acquisition." Then he pressed send. He looked back up at the crew. "I'll stay seated," he said. "But remember this moment, because one day you'll answer to me." The attendants exchanged puzzled glances, unsure if it was a threat or a riddle. But Malik knew exactly what it was, a promise. Outside, the engines roared to life. Inside, the cabin buzzed with tension, ignorance, and a lesson waiting to unfold. In 30 minutes, they'd all find out that the man they tried to humiliate had just become their new boss. For a long moment, no one spoke. The cabin buzzed only with the low hum of the engines and the faint tap of a camera recording. Every second stretched thin, the way time does before something breaks. Malik Carter sat motionless in seat 1A, his back straight, his expression unreadable. Around him, whispers coiled through the air like smoke. Is he still refusing to move? They're gonna call security. Man's just asking for trouble. But Malik didn't hear them anymore. He'd gone somewhere deeper, a place where noise couldn't reach. In his mind, he was 16 again, standing outside a store in Atlanta, accused of stealing a jacket he hadn't even touched. He remembered the way the store clerk had looked at him, the same tight smile, the same disbelief that a black boy could afford what he wanted. Now, decades later, he sat in first class, worth hundreds of millions, and somehow the expression hadn't changed, only the setting. He took a slow breath, steady and deliberate. The kind a man takes when he's learned that power doesn't always roar, sometimes it waits. The attendant's radio crackled. Security en route. She didn't look at him when she spoke, as if avoiding his eyes might make her decision feel justified. Malik closed his laptop and folded his hands. His reflection glimmered faintly in the dark screen, a mirror of restraint. If he wanted, he could end this with a single call. One name, one sentence. But that wasn't the point. He wanted them to see who they were without his title attached. He wanted them to see what respect looked like when you stripped away power and skin became the test. The captain appeared again, voice lower this time. "Sir, last chance. Step off the plane peacefully, and we'll get this sorted at the gate." Malik tilted his head, calm as ever. "And when it's sorted, who apologizes?" The captain hesitated. "Sir, I don't want this to go any further." "Neither do I," Malik said quietly. "But it's already gone too far." Phones kept rolling. Someone whispered, "This is going to go viral." But Malik wasn't performing. He wasn't here for the spectacle. He was here for the truth, the raw, unfiltered kind that corporate training videos never cover. A flight attendant whispered something to the captain. He nodded, frustration pulling at his jaw. They stepped aside, talking in low tones. Malik glanced toward the aisle, where passengers pretended not to stare. He met the eyes of a young black boy sitting in economy, watching through the curtain gap. Their gazes locked. The boy's eyes were wide not in fear, but in recognition. Malik offered the smallest smile. A message unspoken. "Hold your head up. Don't ever let them tell you you're out of place." Then, with a quiet exhale, he reached for his phone. A notification blinked. Deal completed. Ownership transfer confirmed. The timestamp, 10:02 a.m. He looked at it for 1 second, then 2. And for the first time that morning, a spark of something shifted in his eyes, not anger, not pride, but purpose. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and straightened his jacket. The flight attendants were still debating what to do when the cabin intercom beeped. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice crackled, "we're experiencing a short delay. Please remain seated. It is have to a process of your process they're having." Malik leaned back, closed his eyes, and whispered under his breath, "Delay all you want. The sky still belongs to me." The aisle lights flickered softly as 2 uniformed officers boarded the plane. Their presence drew every eye in the cabin, that ripple of curiosity that always follows authority. The tension sharpened, humming just beneath the surface. Malik didn't turn around. He heard the shift in the crowd, the low murmurs, the faint chime of another phone camera clicking into record mode. He'd expected this. He'd lived this. "Good morning, folks," one of the officers said, his tone deceptively calm. "We're just here to handle a minor misunderstanding." The lead attendant pointed toward Malik without hesitation. "That's him, seat 1A. The words struck the air like a gavel. "That's him. Do have lock S." 3 syllables that erased everything else. He was his degree, his empire, his influence, and reduced him, once again, to a problem to be removed. Malik looked up slowly, his eyes meeting the officers. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "you can put the handcuffs away. I haven't committed a crime." The taller officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "We've been told you're sitting in a seat that doesn't belong to you." Malik let out a quiet breath, almost amused. "That's the story, huh?" Behind them, a passenger whispered, "Finally. Took them long enough." Another voice, "Should have known." The younger officer cleared his throat. "Sir, if you'll just come with us, we can figure this out off the plane." Malik's tone softened, not with submission but with control. "Before I move anywhere, you should know what you're walking into." End quote. He reached for his phone again, scrolling with the precision of a man who owned time itself. The screen glowed faintly in the dim cabin. A logo appeared, the airline's own crest, stamped on an official digital document. He turned the phone around, showing the officer the subject line. "Acquisition confirmed, Malik Carter Group Holdings." For a moment, no one spoke. The officer blinked, unsure if it was real. The attendant leaned in, squinting, then drew back as if she'd seen a ghost. Malik set the phone back on his tray table. "You were saying something about ownership?" A hush swept through first class. The man in 1B lowered his phone, the live stream still running. Someone gasped softly. But Malik wasn't gloating. He didn't need to. He simply leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice calm as glass. "You're all witnesses," he said. "This is how bias hides in plain sight, dressed in protocol, justified by policy. And every time it happens, someone says, it's just procedure." The captain appeared again, eyes wide now. Mr. Carter. Malik turned, almost smiling. Ah, so now I'm Mr. Carter, the younger officer stammered. Sir, we didn't know. That's the problem, Malik said. You never ask who someone is until after you've decided who they're not. The silence that followed was heavy. The attendants shifted uneasily. The passengers stared at their shoes. Malik stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and spoke low enough for only the nearest few to hear. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed you never thought to look beyond the surface. He paused, then looked toward the officers again. Gentlemen, you can stay if you like. But this flight? It's mine now. The taller officer nodded awkwardly, murmuring something into his radio. The attendants exchanged panicked looks. Across the aisle, a passenger whispered, Wait, is he serious? Another replied, Dead serious. Malik returned to his seat, eyes on the runway outside. The engines roared again, but this time, it wasn't just the plane preparing to lift off, it was every ounce of his quiet, deliberate justice. In the reflection of the window, his own calm face stared back the face of a man who just turned humiliation into power and ignorance into exposure. The cabin had gone completely silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to dim beneath the weight of realization. Every phone that had been raised a few minutes ago was now lowered, hands trembling slightly, unsure whether to keep filming or pretend none of it had happened. The captain cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, may I speak with you privately for a moment? Adder. Malik looked up, his gaze cool and deliberate. No need. Everyone might as well hear this. It concerns them too. The attendant, the same one who'd told him to move, was frozen in place. Her confidence, the stiff, polite kind that comes from uniform and authority, had vanished. Now she looked smaller somehow, like she wished she could disappear into the galley. Malik leaned back, speaking with the calm rhythm of someone who had nothing left to prove. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, he said, but I do believe in accountability. Because if I didn't, I'd be no better than the system that taught you to look at me and assume I didn't belong. He turned to the officers, then to the passengers. You all saw it. No yelling, no aggression, no threat. Yet somehow I was the one treated like a suspect for sitting in a seat I paid for. A murmur ran through the crowd. A few heads nodded. The man in 1C, who'd smirked earlier, looked down at his shoes. The woman with diamond earrings clasped her hands tightly, her ring flashing under the cabin light like a guilty signal. The younger officer finally spoke, his voice low. Sir, I apologize, we were just following. Procedure, Malik interrupted, finishing the sentence for him. I know. It's always procedure. He paused. But tell me, officer, when was the last time procedure embarrassed someone who didn't look like me? No answer. Just the quiet rustle of shame. The captain swallowed, stepping forward cautiously. Mr. Carter, I think we can resolve this respectfully. Perhaps we can make a formal apology on behalf of the airline once we land. Malik tilted his head, studying him. Once we land? He let out a soft laugh. Captain, I think you should check your messages. Confused, the man took out his company tablet. A new alert blinked on the screen, an internal announcement from corporate headquarters. Subject: Leadership update. Airline acquisition completed. Effective immediately. Ownership transition to Carter Holdings. The color drained from the captain's face. You're the new owner? Malik nodded once. I told you this flight belongs to me. The attendants froze, realizing the magnitude of what they'd done. One of them started to stammer an apology, but Malik lifted a hand gently, stopping her. Save it, he said softly. It's not about me. It's about everyone who's ever been judged before being known. He stood then calm, unhurried, and addressed the whole cabin. You want to know what power looks like? It's not the money, not the title. It's restraint. The ability to face disrespect and not return it in kind. His gaze swept the room, steady and warm now. Because every time you choose dignity over rage, you win twice, once over them, and once over the world's expectation of you. Silence again, but this time it was different. Not heavy, reverent. The captain lowered his eyes. Mr. Carter, welcome aboard. Malik smiled faintly. Thank you, Captain. Now, let's fly. The officers backed away. The attendants disappeared quietly down the aisle. As Malik sat back down, the engines roared once more, and this time, it wasn't tension that filled the air. It was respect. Earned, not demanded. Through the window, the sky opened wide ahead like it, too, had finally understood who it belonged to. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane began to taxi. But even in the half-dark, every passenger could still see the man in seat 1A, the man they had doubted, whispered about, recorded. Now, no one dared look directly at him for too long. Malik Carter sat quietly, elbows resting on the armrests, gaze steady on the clouds forming beyond the window. His composure hadn't changed. If anything, the calm seemed deeper, the stillness of someone whose authority doesn't need to be announced. The captain's voice came over the intercom, softer than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be departing shortly, and on behalf of our new ownership team, welcome aboard." A ripple of realization swept through the cabin again. New ownership team. Every eye turned, inevitably, toward Malik. The man in 1C leaned over slightly, his earlier arrogance replaced by something closer to awe. "Sir, I didn't realize." Malik turned his head slowly. "You weren't supposed to. That's the point." The man nodded awkwardly, his face flushed. Across the aisle, the woman with the diamonds bit her lip, avoiding eye contact. The attendants moved more carefully now, every motion measured, every word weighed. Respect had arrived, but too late to feel clean. Malik reached into his bag and pulled out a slim leather folder. Inside, a stack of documents, marked with the golden insignia of Carter Holdings Aviation Group. He flipped it open, revealing signatures still wet from that morning. Everything official, everything his. He placed one page on the tray table, the acquisition confirmation, and took a quiet photo with his phone. Not for social media, not for revenge, for record, for memory. Because this wasn't about proving power, it was about remembering restraint. A young attendant, not the one who'd insulted him, but another, clearly nervous, approached hesitantly. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, "would you like something to drink? Champagne? Coffee?" He looked up at her, smiled kindly. "Just water, please." She exhaled in relief, grateful for the kindness she didn't deserve but desperately needed. When she returned, she whispered, "I'm sorry for what happened earlier." Malik nodded once. "It wasn't you, but thank you for saying it anyway." He took the glass, watched the reflection of the cabin swirl in the water, small faces, quiet shame. Then he spoke, not to her, not even to anyone in particular, just loud enough for those within earshot to hear. "I've spent years building something that would let me fly wherever I want," he said softly. "But no matter how high you climb, there will always be someone waiting to remind you where they think you belong." The older man in 1B, silent since the beginning, finally spoke. "Well," he said, voice trembling, "you just reminded all of us who's really in control." Malik gave a faint smile. "Control isn't the goal. Understanding is." A soft chime signaled takeoff clearance. The captain's voice returned, composed but humble. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure." As the engines thundered, Malik's phone buzzed again. A text from his assistant. "Congratulations, sir. Press release goes live in 5 minutes." He typed back, "Make sure the headline focuses on values, not victory." The jet surged forward, and through the window, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. First class, once tight with tension, now felt reverent, a quiet courtroom where judgment had met its verdict. Malik took a sip of water and whispered, half to himself, half to the universe, "Justice doesn't shout, it ascends." And as the plane lifted into the night sky, the reflection of clouds rippled across his glass, a silent applause from above. 30,000 feet above the clouds, the world finally quieted. The seatbelt light flickered off, and the cabin softened into that calm hum that only exists once tension dissolves. But no one in first class was truly relaxed, not after what they'd just witnessed. Malik Carter sat with his eyes closed, head resting lightly against the seat. No arrogance, no gloating, just silence, the kind that follows a lesson learned. The attendant who had first confronted him lingered by the galley door. Her hands fidgeted at her apron, her eyes darting toward him every few seconds, unsure how to approach. Eventually she did. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice low. "I wanted to apologize. I made assumptions that weren't fair." He opened his eyes, met hers. "Thank you," he said simply. She swallowed. "If I could take it back?" "You can't," he said gently, "but you can grow from it." She nodded, tears threatening. "I've worked this route for 8 years. I thought I'd seen every kind of passenger." He smiled faintly. "And today you saw one you hadn't." The captain's voice interrupted over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now cruising at 35,000 feet. On behalf of Carter Holdings, we'd like to extend our gratitude to all of you. There was a pause then, softly. Mr. Carter, it's an honor to have you aboard. A few passengers clapped quietly. Others joined. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. Malik nodded once in acknowledgement, then turned his attention to the small boy in economy, the one who had been peeking through the curtain earlier. Their eyes met again. The boy smiled shyly. Malik raised a hand. A subtle wave, a quiet reminder that dignity travels further than status. Outside, sunlight streaked across the horizon, splitting the clouds into rivers of gold. The sky didn't care about color or class. It opened itself equally to all who rose high enough. Malik reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen, sleek black engraved with his initials. He took one of the airline's napkins and wrote something slowly across it. When the attendant returned to collect his glass, he handed her the napkin. "For you," he said. She hesitated, then unfolded it. On the napkin, in steady handwriting, were 4 words. Respect should be default. She pressed her lips together, nodding, unable to speak. Malik turned back toward the window, his reflection blending with the clouds beyond the glass. For a man like him, power was never about domination, it was about correction, about showing, not shouting. He thought about all the headlines that would follow. Black CEO owns airline after discrimination incident. The irony would spread like wildfire, but he didn't care about the spectacle. He cared about the story that would echo behind it, the story of every person told they didn't belong, who quietly built their own door instead of waiting for permission to enter. As the plane glided through open air, Malik exhaled slowly. The storm had passed both outside and within. He whispered, almost inaudibly, "Dignity doesn't need revenge. It only needs truth." The camera would linger on his reflection's sunlight, tracing his outline against the clouds, the faint shimmer of power earned, not flaunted. Fade out to black. Then, a single line appears across the screen. Respect isn't granted, it's remembered. And in that final silence, with the sky stretching endlessly before him, Malik Carter, the man once denied his seat, sat where he always belonged. In command. At peace. Above it all.